Let's start with the truth. Most people avoid because it's uncomfortable. Your energy is limited, not metaphorically, biologically, psychologically, emotionally. Every day you wake up with a finite amount of mental focus, emotional resilience, and physical drive. And the way you spend that energy determines the trajectory of your life. In 2026, the people who win won't be the loudest or the most visible. They'll be the most intentional. They'll be the ones who stop wasting energy on things that don't move the needle and start investing it where it compounds into themselves. Most people are exhausted not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing too much of the wrong things. Explaining themselves to people who already decided not to understand, reacting to opinions that don't pay their bills, carrying emotional baggage that has nothing to do with their future. Energy leaks are subtle, but they are deadly. Psychology tells us that attention is one of the most expensive cognitive resources we have. Whatever you focus on repeatedly doesn't just take your time, it shapes your identity. So when you give your attention to drama, comparison, or validation seeking, you're not just distracted, you're training your mind to stay small. Here's where the shift happens. Focusing on yourself is not selfish, it's strategic. Philosophically, it's rooted in responsibility. You are the only person who will live with the full consequences of your choices. No one else will wake up in your body with your regrets or your unrealized potential. When you truly understand that, you stop trying to win arguments and start trying to win days. You stop trying to be seen and start trying to be effective. In 2026, growth will demand deep work, not surface level hustle, not motivational quotes, but the kind of focused effort that requires silence and discipline. Neuroscience backs this up. High-level performance requires long periods of uninterrupted concentration, but you can't enter that state if your energy is scattered across 100 emotional tabs open in your mind. Every unnecessary conversation, every online comparison, every reactive response pulls you further away from mastery. Focusing on yourself means closing those tabs deliberately. And let's be honest, a lot of what drains our energy is the need for validation. We want people to see our effort, acknowledge our struggle, applaud our intentions, but validation is a weak fuel. It burns fast and leaves you empty. Self-investment, on the other hand, compounds. When you spend energy learning a skill, strengthening your body, refining your thinking, or mastering your emotions, the return isn't immediate applause, it's long-term power. Quiet power. Eric Thomas often talks about obsession, not with fame, but with the process. That's what focusing on yourself really looks like. It's waking up when you don't feel like it. It's studying when no one's watching. It's training your mind to stay locked in, even when there's no external reward. That kind of focus requires saying no to people, to noise, to unnecessary explanations, not out of arrogance, but out of respect for your own potential. There's also a philosophical humility in this approach. When you focus on yourself, you accept that you don't control outcomes, only effort. You stop trying to manage perception and start managing behavior. You stop arguing with reality and start adapting to it. Silence becomes natural here because you're too busy building to perform, too invested in growth to chase attention. And here's the paradox. When you truly focus on yourself, you become more valuable to others. Your thinking sharpens, your presence deepens, your words carry weight because they're backed by work. You don't need to announce your progress because it shows up in how you move, how you speak, how you decide. That's why the next key points, silence, discipline, and letting results speak, flow naturally from this foundation. You can't stay silent if you're insecure about your direction. You can't let progress speak if you're not actually progressing. So in 2026, guard your energy like it's your most valuable asset, because it is. Ask yourself before you speak, before you react, before you engage, does this make me stronger or does it just make me louder? The people who change their lives aren't the ones who know the most. They're the ones who protect their focus long enough to become something more. Now let's talk about silence, because silence is misunderstood. People think silence means weakness, fear, or avoidance. But in reality, silence is one of the most disciplined strategies a focused person can master. In 2026, silence won't be about hiding, it will be about protecting. Protecting your energy, your clarity, your direction, and most importantly, your momentum. Psychologically, every time you speak, you expose part of your inner world. Your plans, your emotions, your intentions, once they're out there, they're no longer fully yours. Not everyone who listens wants you to win. Not everyone who asks questions is rooting for your growth. Some people listen to respond, some listen to judge, and some listen to suddenly redirect you back to who they're comfortable with you being. Silence is how you keep your vision intact long enough for it to become real. There's a reason ancient philosophy respected silence. Stoics believed that restraint in speech was a sign of inner order. When your mind is disciplined, you don't feel the urge to explain yourself to everyone. You don't argue with people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You don't chase closure in conversations that don't deserve your energy. Silence, in this sense, is not passive, it's control. Eric Thomas often emphasizes emotional maturity, even when he's speaking with intensity. Emotional maturity doesn't mean you don't feel, it means you don't let feelings control your actions. Staying silent is one of the clearest demonstrations of that maturity. When provoked, when doubted, when underestimated, your first impulse might be to react, to defend, to prove. But discipline teaches you to pause. And in that pause, you reclaim your power. Think about how much energy is wasted on unnecessary explanations. Explaining your goals to people who don't share your hunger, justifying your boundaries to people who benefited from you having none, defending decisions that were never meant to be voted on. Silence shuts all of that down. It says, I don't need agreement to move forward. And that mindset is dangerous in a good way. From a neurological standpoint, reacting emotionally keeps the brain in a constant state of stimulation and stress. Silence interrupts that loop. It creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies wisdom. When you stay silent, you're not suppressing your thoughts. You're choosing the right time and place to release them. That strategy, silence also sharpens your awareness. When you talk less, you observe more. You start noticing patterns, who supports you consistently, who disappears when you're serious, who only shows up when you're accessible. You hear what people reveal unintentionally. Silence turns you into a student of human behavior, and knowledge, when paired with self-control, becomes leverage. In 2026, oversharing will be a liaba. We live in a culture that rewards instant expression, but instant expression often leads to long-term regret. Every opinion doesn't need a microphone. Every emotion doesn't need an audience. Silence gives your thoughts time to mature. It forces you to process internally before projecting externally. That's how leaders are formed, not by constant output, but by intentional response. And let's be clear, silence doesn't mean you don't speak at all. It means when you do speak, it matters. Your words carry weight because they're rare and precise. People listen differently when you're not constantly explaining yourself. Your presence changes when you're no longer reactive. That's why silence aligns so naturally with focus. You can't do deep work while you're constantly narrating your journey. You can't build quietly if you're always announcing your next move. Silence also protects you from premature feedback. When you share ideas too early, they're fragile. Opinions, especially uninformed ones, can kill momentum before it has a chance to solidify. Silence allows you to build strength in private, to fail without an audience, to adjust without embarrassment. That's not hiding. That's intelligent incubation. And eventually, silence creates something powerful, credibility. When you don't talk much but consistently deliver, people stop asking questions and start paying attention. That's when progress begins to speak for you, which leads directly into the next principle. Silence sets the stage for results. It clears the noise so your actions can be heard. Once you've learned to protect your energy and you've embraced silence as a discipline, something powerful starts to happen. Your progress begins to speak for you. And this is where a lot of people get exposed. Because talking about goals is easy, posting intentions is easy, declaring ambition is easy, but progress is undeniable, and it cannot be faked for long. Psychologically, human beings are wired to respond to evidence, not explanations. You can argue all day about your potential, your intentions, your circumstances, but consistent results short-circuit every debate. This is why results are so threatening to people who live on talk. Progress doesn't negotiate. It doesn't justify itself. It just shows up. And when it does, the conversation changes automatically. Eric Thomas always says, don't talk about it, be about it. That's not just motivation, it's a principle of credibility. When your life shows evidence of discipline, people stop questioning your direction. When your habits reflect consistency, people stop doubting your seriousness. And when your outcomes improve, people stop asking for explanations. Progress creates authority without noise. Here's the philosophical layer. Results are the only honest measure of alignment between who you say you are and what you actually do. That alignment builds integrity. Integrity isn't about perfection. It's about congruence. When your words, actions, and outcomes point in the same direction, you gain internal peace and external respect. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth because your daily behavior is already making the argument. One reason progress speaks so loudly is because it's rare. Most people start strong and fade quietly. They announce motivation, but abandon discipline. So when someone stays consistent, especially without broadcasting it, it stands out. Quiet consistency disrupts expectations. It forces people to reevaluate what they thought they knew about you. Not because you demanded recognition, but because you earned it. From a psychological standpoint, visible progress also changes your internal identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying and start seeing yourself as someone who does. That shift is massive. Trying is emotional. Doing is factual. The more evidence you accumulate through action, the less dependent you become on motivation or approval. You don't need to hype yourself up when you trust your process. This is why staying silent earlier matters so much. When you don't announce your moves, you remove pressure. You give yourself room to grow at your own pace. You're not performing, you building. And when the results finally surface, they feel heavier because they weren't advertised. People feel them before they hear about them. Progress also speaks because it forces accountability. You can lie to people, but you can't lie to outcomes. If you say you're focused, but your life shows chaos, the truth is obvious. If you say you're disciplined, but there's no measurable improvement, the results tell the real story. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it's also liberating. Because once you commit to letting progress speak, you stop hiding behind excuses. In 2026, credibility will be currency. Not followers, not opinions, not explanations. People will trust those who demonstrate consistency under pressure. Those who show up even when it's inconvenient. Those whose lives quietly reflect structure, growth, and control. That kind of credibility can't be downloaded or borrowed. It has to be built one disciplined day at a time. And here's the part most people miss. When progress speaks, it speaks to you first. Before anyone else notices, you notice. You feel stronger, clearer, more grounded. Your confidence isn't loud because it's no longer fragile. You don't need to win debates because you're winning internally. That internal win changes how you walk into rooms, how you handle disrespect, how you respond to doubt. Progress also removes the need for revenge or validation. You don't need to prove people wrong when your life naturally moves past their expectations. You don't need to announce growth when it's visible in how you think, decide, and execute. Success handled quietly is the most disruptive form of success there is. So as you move forward, remember this. Let your habits talk. Let your discipline explain. And let your results conclude every conversation. Because when progress speaks, it doesn't raise its voice. It ends the debate. When everything we've talked about comes together, focus, energy, discipline, silence, undeniable progress, it all rests on one final foundation, inner discipline. Because without inner discipline, everything else collapses. You can't stay focused if your emotions run you. You can't stay silent if your ego needs constant reassurance. And you can't let progress speak if you don't have the consistency to produce it. In 2026, external approval is going to be cheap. Inner discipline will be rare and priceless. Let's be clear about something. Discipline is not motivation. Motivation is emotional, temporary, and unreliable. Discipline is structural. It's what shows up when motivation disappears. Psychologically, discipline is the ability to delay gratification, to choose long-term growth over short-term comfort. And most people fail right there. They know what they should do, but they don't do it consistently because it's uncomfortable, boring, or invisible. Inner discipline is what allows you to stay aligned even when no one is clapping. Philosophically, this is about self-mastery. Ancient thinkers believed that the highest form of power was control over the self, not control over others, not influence, not status, but mastery of impulses, emotions, and reactions. When you have inner discipline, you're not easily provoked. You're not easily distracted. You're not easily swayed by trends, opinions, or criticism. You move with intention because you've decided who you are before the world tries to tell you. Eric Thomas often talks about doing what you hate to do like you love it. That's discipline. It's training your mind to obey your values instead of your feelings. Feelings change daily. Values don't. When you operate from discipline, you don't ask, how do I feel today? You ask, what does the standard require? That mindset alone separates leaders from followers. External approval is seductive because it feels like confirmation, likes, praise, recognition. It gives a quick hit of confidence. But psychologically, relying on approval creates dependence. You start adjusting your behavior to maintain acceptance. You dilute your standards to avoid discomfort. And over time, you lose clarity about what you actually want. Inner discipline cuts through that noise. It anchors you. It reminds you that approval doesn't equal progress and applause doesn't equal alignment. This is especially important in silence. When you're quiet, there's no feedback loop, no instant validation, no reassurance. Silence exposes your inner world. And if you don't have discipline, silence becomes unbearable. That's why many people talk too much, post too much, explain too much. They were trying to escape the discomfort of being alone with their thoughts. Inner discipline allows you to sit in that discomfort without running from it. Discipline also creates emotional regulation. You stop reacting to disrespect, doubt, or delay, not because you don't notice it, but because you've decided it doesn't control you. You don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to correct every misunderstanding. You don't need to prove your worth in every room. That restraint is power, and it's built daily in small, unglamorous decisions. There's a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you keep promises to yourself. When you say you'll wake up early and you do, when you say you'll stay consistent and you do, when you say you'll stay focused and you do, that confidence doesn't need an audience. It shows up in your posture, your tone, your patience. You move differently when you trust yourself. In 2026, emotional intelligence will outperform raw talent. The ability to stay calm under pressure, to stay disciplined under temptation, to stay aligned under criticism, that's what will separate those who last from those who burn out. Talent gets attention, discipline gets results, and results sustained over time create freedom. Inner discipline also protects your purpose. When you're disciplined, you don't abandon your path just because it's lonely or slow. You understand that meaningful progress is often quiet and misunderstood. You stay committed even when there's no immediate reward. That level of self-control is rare, and that's why it's so valuable. This is where everything we've discussed comes full circle. You focus on yourself because discipline demands clarity. You stay silent because discipline values restraint. You let progress speak because discipline produces consistency. And you stop seeking approval because discipline already gave you something better, self-respect. So as you step into 2026, remember this: the loudest validation you'll ever receive is the life you build when no one is watching. Master yourself, and you'll never need permission to become who you were meant to be.